Hi, Paula. Hi, Dr. Schultz. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me. I want to introduce you to our audience. Paula Allen is the Global Leader of Research and Client Insights at TELUS Health, and Dr. Krista Schultz is the Associate Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Alumni at Yorkville University. So thank you so much for joining me today, right before the holiday season. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can reduce stress. But meanwhile, I've managed to jam you into this episode right before the holidays. So thank you so much for your time today. I want to just start off with, Paula, if you don't mind, I want to talk a bit about the TELUS Mental Health Index, which some of the things that really stood out for me when I was reading about it was that there was a notable drop in overall mental wellness, especially around this time of year, December, leading up to the holidays. A few key issues that stood out were anxiety, depression, isolation, and that impacts work productivity. Can you tell me just a little bit about the study and what these what these mean for employees and people in general?
Yeah, very happy to. We started developing, validating, and benchmarking the mental health index in 2017. Took 3 years to do so and have a great deal of data in that period. But we started publishing monthly in 2020. And from 2020 to now, and we're seeing the trend even start now, we had seen that drop that you had mentioned. So that decline in mental health. So first and foremost, what we saw is a massive decline between 2019 and 2020. So with the COVID pandemic, but we
Yeah.
haven't really seen a recovery. So it's been pretty much the same place since that time. But we do see seasonal ups and downs, and we do see a peak in summer, in the warmer months, and we see a really noticeable drop between late fall and February. One of the most interesting things about that, though, is that the decline is more significant for women.
Mhm.
Overall, we see lower mental health scores, and we have a very sensitive scale. You know, it goes from 0 to 100. So we're able to look at mental distress on one end of the scale to mental well-being and gradations of mental well-being on the other end of the scale. So overall, we see lower scores for women. During the holiday season, the decline is even greater. So there is a decline for men, but the decline is greater for women.
Okay. Can you explain? I mean, I can guess as a woman what that decline might be related to, but do you have any more data on that?
Yeah, we certainly do. So we looked a little bit under it. We see increases in symptoms of depression, anxiety symptoms. We see less optimism. We also see more concern. So the women are 30% more likely to feel concerned about being able to afford what they need to afford during the holiday season. So whether it's gifts or food or any kind of activity, there is that greater financial sensitivity. So I think what this does is actually mirrors what we're seeing overall. Because recall I said the mental health scores of women are generally lower. So we see a fair bit more sensitivity to a number of things. So sensitivity to what happens in the family. So not just a caregiving responsibility, which is huge, but also sensitivity by taking on some of the distress, some of the ups and downs of family members. We definitely see more financial vulnerability. And that's because of type of employment, partial employment, control of finances in the household. We still see some of that, even in 2024. And that is a big issue because, finances are largely your life safety net in one respect, and other people are your other safety net. And when either is really compromised, then you are more vulnerable. And I think all of that just intensifies around the holiday season. So accountability for everybody, tasks that need to be done, financial sensitivities, all of that happens with greater intensity at the holidays. And that's why we believe we're seeing that greater decline.
And I would add to that, a lot of us as we get older, we've lost our parents, maybe grandparents. The holidays aren't always as joyous for everybody. There is a little bit of grief. It's a little bit of melancholy. The finances, especially right now, given like the high cost of living, groceries, like people are struggling just to, find a place to live right now. So trying to entertain over the holidays on that really super tight budget is really, really stressful.
Yeah.
So, I do think women do carry the burden of the holidays, whether it's, like I know in my family, I buy all the gifts for like nieces, nephews, moms, dads, in-laws. Drives me crazy because I hate shopping. And right now we have a postal strike, so I can't even go to my usual go-to and go on Amazon and get the Amazon elves to do it for me. So, yeah, I do see that. And I see also, this time of year, everyone's getting sick in my family. I feel like I'm running back and forth. I'm dropping off meals. I'm praying we're going to be able to spend Christmas together. But I do think we still have a hangover from COVID. COVID really, like, I haven't myself personally, I feel worse now than I did during COVID. And I
Without
noticed,
question. Yeah. Well, without
yeah.
question, there's a couple of things. Like, first of all, with everything that you said, you were making me feel tired, and really just doing all of the things, taking on that responsibility, it makes you feel fatigued. So practically, you're tired, but just even cognitively, keeping track of everything and knowing what you have to do next, and
Mhm.
feeling responsibility for outcome because it might be high profile and a big family get together. That's definitely one thing. You also
Yeah.
mentioned that I wanted to amplify what you said around holidays are not always happy. Sometimes the thing that is amplified is distress, difficulties in relationships, etc. And definitely wanted to touch on what you said around COVID, because we have had this was a major societal trauma, and some people went into full crisis, other people were impacted less, but overall, when you look at our population health, it is worse. We do have greater sensitivity to stress. So what
Mm.
that means is that everything that would have, got under our skin before gets under our skin a little sooner and a little bit more. We're
Yeah.
also quicker to anger. We're also quicker to cynicism, where we are more likely to enter into conflict. And even if you yourself are able to sort of manage and pull that back, it probably does affect you sort of emotionally. You might have that thought, but then you rethink it, but you're exposed to other people who are quicker to anger,
Yes.
who are more
Mm.
sensitive to stress, and that impacts us as well. So we do have this, post-COVID overlay. I'd say at this point, our mental health has just been reset. But on
Mhm.
top of it, we have environmental things and seasonal things that impact us.
And I want to throw one more thing in there, menopause. So, as someone who is postmenopausal, this season is really challenging for me because brain fog. So, trying to stay on top of all the lists, all the items, all the organized like parties, get-togethers that fall under my, wheelhouse. I can't stay on top of it, and I start getting really stressed. I also hate the thought of having to wear a wool sweater because it's super hot all the time, but and to your point, like I have to take my daughter to the Eaton Center to go shopping. I can't tell you like what I would dread more than this. Nothing. Because it's the crowds, it's the chaos, but it's also, like you said, I feel a little more trepidatious these days going out in big crowds just because of the fact that there is a bigger mental health crisis around us. I see living in downtown Toronto, so much of it on the streetcars, the subways, just in storefronts. Like I don't feel as comfortable as I did, and it's definitely not a calming experience.
So again, you're hitting on something super, super important. And, one of the things that we looked at, because the mental health index, just to describe it a little bit further, we look at overall mental health and well-being, on a sensitive scale, and we look at subscales, optimism, isolation, symptoms of anxiety, etc. But we also do deep dives on particular issues. So one of the deep dives we did was basically around women's experience of menopause. And one of the things that really struck me about that is there was a large proportion, about over 70%, felt that they were going into perimenopause and menopause and didn't feel knowledgeable, awareness, equipped. They had, high level passing knowledge of what was going on with their bodies. And what was quite clear is that there was a strong correlation between lack of knowledge and mental distress.
Yes.
So, on top of the physical things that are happening to you, sort of the brain fog, sensitivity to pain, musculoskeletal, there's all sorts of things that would put you in a more difficult place. But not knowing makes it worse. Not
Yes.
knowing means your self care is going to be scattered or non existent. And not knowing means that you're probably not going to get what you need from your healthcare provider or others in order to manage this phase of life. So, data driven. I've become the biggest advocate for everybody, healthcare providers, everybody to sort of be more aware, but in particular to empower women with that awareness as well.
Absolutely. There's a really high percentage of women who know the term now, but don't really know what it means. There's still confusion around it. There's still some people in the healthcare system who say that perimenopause is not a thing. And it's confusing. We might not all get hot flashes. We might not all miss a period, but things are actually happening. And then that little bit of brain fog that starts happening, or that depression or anxiety that's a little unusual for us, that can be really distressing. So, yeah, I definitely think that when we're talking about, strategies to manage our stress over the holidays, we do have to factor in the hormone roller coaster ride that most of us are on. So, yeah, and we'll get to some strategies. But I do want to talk a little bit more, you know, uh, Dr. Schultz. I know that Yorkville has done their study. One of the things that stood out was obviously the financial stress, regardless of age. And when I read that, I thought, yeah, we're all, like we had talked about earlier, we are all under a lot of stress and anxiety and fear because of, prices of groceries, gas, everything. Like, it's just so hard to make a living these days. But now factor in, what if you're someone who is aging out of your career, or you're getting close to retirement and you're starting to worry about how you're going to live the last couple of chapters of your life without a steady income? Or what if you lose your job because of, well, because the economy is so terrible, but also we're getting aged out of our careers.
And Jackie, those are really good points. And thank you again for just highlighting this really important topic. Paul and I have been working on this over the last few months. And when Yorkville University did that financial study in the beginning of 2024, I was doing a lot of interviews on how we're feeling about that financial stress. And we do see that in therapeutic environments. So what we notice is that, our alumni, our practitioners, our therapists, our psychotherapists, our psychologists are hearing that in their offices. So thankfully, there are women who are accessing good, services to go in and talk about their feelings and that level of financial stress that's being placed upon them. But you also raise a really good point about, we are seeing second, third, fourth careers. And there are women who are really at the point in their lives where they are in that, for lack of better stage judgments, perimenopause, menopause states, where they're saying, I don't know that this is all I want in my life. Right. Is there something I need to explore? Really looking at, is that just a good paycheck, or does this make my heart happy? And they're getting a lot of that self-reflective, those feelings. But unfortunately, what's happening is we're also getting a lot of mixed messages. So when you look on social media platforms like TikTok, for example, lots of women are being told that perimenopause symptoms are actually ADHD. And maybe they have ADHD, or maybe they're just depressed and they need some antidepressants. And those messages are not healthy or good for any of us. So I think that, encouraging us to really look at our lives and say, for whatever life circumstances we ended up here in our careers, in our roles, in our systems, whatever has led us here, we should celebrate that. But is that really what we want to take forward in these next stages of our lives. And you also mentioned something really interesting too about where we are as far as family systems. I mean, myself, I'm an empty nester. Our daughter is 23, but I have 79-year-old parents. So she is well launched, doing very well in university, getting married. But we're still momming, right? At this point, I don't think we're ever going to quit momming.
No.
But we're still in that mothering role, but we're also in this other role of thinking and planning for aging parents. Where are they going to live? What level of supports do they need? How involved are we? So when we look at our own place in our careers, we also take that into consideration, because what if we leave our career for something that makes our heart happy, but we're not financially set in that new career and we still have these responsibilities on both sides? Maybe mom and dad are not financially healthy. Maybe kiddo needs more help in university than you'd anticipated. But we have to take that into consideration, and that often affects our own decisions and our own mental health.
That's a really good point. And I think about, the stage you're talking about, especially as we hit our late 40s. And I like to say the hormone that we're losing is the people pleasing hormone. And it is an actual thing that happens to us. Like, it's not a decision. We actually do start to put more emphasis on us and our own care. And we stop worrying about everybody else because of the age that we're at and the stage that we're at. Although I have a 13-year-old, but I can feel that happening, even though I know she needs 100% of my time. And I will not obviously neglect her, but I do feel that I'm starting to not care as much about other people that I have been looking after, friends, neighbors, whatever, for years, helping out. Now I'm starting to say, no, I can't. My plate is full. My cup is running over, not in a good way. And I can feel myself, I can feel when the burnout's coming. And that's when I have to like really reevaluate everything around me. But, we do jump. These are when we see, like, this is sort of the age I see women really jump and try something new because there's a new courage. And that is amazing. And it does fill our bucket and our heart. However, women, women entrepreneurs do not get a lot of financial support, especially through, angel investments. So, it's such a catch 22. You want to really encourage women to go out there and it's your turn, but it's scary. It's really, it's financially really trepidatious. We also see higher divorce rates, in this age group. So now you've got, like maybe you've never managed your own finances before. That's really stressful, taking over finances that you've never been on top of. And I'm terrible with math. So this is why we have to keep my husband alive, because I'm like, dude, I cannot take that over. That is going to be financial ruin if I do that. So I can understand why finances are so big, because as we've just talked about, it's not just about what's in your bank account. It's about your future. It's about decisions that you have to make. It's about caregiving. So that can be, really, really tricky. And I can see why, that's what we wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about. Like, how am I going to keep, financing or bankrolling my life, especially when I'm at a certain age where it's not easy to get hired anymore. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And Jackie, those are excellent points. And, we talk a lot about, our work and our careers, and we think about that, that physical labor that we put in, that the time that we put in. Hopefully we're getting, the results of that labor. But, Paula and I were talking last week, and I was talking about emotional labor. So emotional labor is actually a psychological phenomenon, and it really largely speaks to women. And what it means is that we're trying to keep everybody happy and comfortable. And
Yes.
and I loved when you said, saying no. I believe no is a complete sentence. No does not need a rationalization. No does not need an explanation from me on why I feel this way, or why I'm saying no, or what I'm going to give in exchange. No can just mean no. And that emotional labor that we take on as women, I think that there hopefully is a phase in our lives, and I agree with you. I think that it is this phase, this perimenopause, menopause phase, where women are saying, no, this emotional labor that I have carried all these decades is too heavy, and I don't want to do this anymore. So no. Um,
Mhm.
at Yorkville, we do see And I don't know if you've seen the stats, but our average student in our counseling psychology program is 36 years old, and 70% of them are women.
Yeah.
So these are second stage career women. These are women who are coming out and saying, you know what, I want to get into this profession. I want to be a therapist, a psychologist. And they're rising to that. And it's really beautiful to see those women cross the stage doing something that they always wanted to do. But most of them say, in the span of the years that I've been at Yorkville, most of them have said to me, the stars just weren't aligned when I started out. I didn't know that this is what I wanted to do or be. I wasn't able to go. So, and now I am, right? And we're seeing this freedom. I just hope that this freedom can include that financial freedom so that we're able to make these choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting, both TELUS Health and Yorkville University doing these studies. And the reason I think it's fascinating is it's stress and anxiety and overload around the holidays. These are not new issues. But when I was reading through both of the studies, things sort of popped out for me that I never thought of. And, we don't know what we don't know. And I don't know how to explain this really well, but when I was reading that, I thought, oh, yeah, like, I didn't even think about the fact that I'm stressed about that. Not that I'm adding stress to my plate, but I'm realizing, like, your studies talk about people in the workforce too, right? Like how this impacts them and not feeling supported in the workforce, either by your employer or by your colleagues. So you can add to that, women's reproductive health definitely not being supported in the work space. So like there are more factors um, impacting our mental health than I actually even thought of. I always look at it from like the midlife health and wellness space and menopause. But when you look around at that load, that mental load, and also the physical load that we have to carry, it is exhausting. Like, Paula, you said earlier, this makes me feel exhausted. But when I read your studies, I'm like, I'm exhausted. No wonder women are tired all the time. So I really I signed up for both of your studies so I can keep getting updates. I think it's really good to know that because one thing I find in our audience of women in perimenopause and menopause is they're very confused. They feel something, but they don't know what to connect it to. And their healthcare providers, for example, aren't trained to really support them in that space. So they have to create this new care circle for themselves and find new resources to help them, which is what we help them do. But when you don't know what's happening, you don't know where to go. You don't know who to ask for help. And you don't even know what questions to ask. So if you like, when I look at some of the points in the study, like the percentage of people who are suffering from even isolation, which I would even tie to, working from home hasn't been the best for everybody. If people don't really understand that that's what's happening to them, how are they supposed to get help? It's just this overall sense of malaise or, lethargy or depression, and you don't know why. And your doctor just gives you a prescription. That's not really the answer. Just like with perimenopause, something's happening in your body and you have to find out what that is because antidepressants and cooling fans are not going to fix it. Right. So, what your studies, I think, do lead people to really question what's happening in their lives, look for answers and solutions, but maybe even reconsider some of the things that they're doing. So that's
Well,
very powerful.
one of the things that resonates really strongly is that it is important for people to have awareness. Like if we didn't know, what was good food or bad food or around exercise, or it would be very hard for us on a day-to-day basis to take care of our physical health appropriately. We'd all be
Yeah.
eating, chocolate and eggs every single day. Eggs are great, but every single day, only meal, it's not so great. So we do need a certain level of knowledge, and we don't have that in our society when it comes to mental health and well-being. We don't have that in our society for other issues that are actually stigmatized. And I would say perimenopause, menopause for years has been stigmatized. So we need that awareness. And at the end of the day, you can self-care, but in everything that we spoke about today, there's a point where we need to reach out for support. And that's okay. And it doesn't have to be huge and it doesn't have to be fancy. Or we as human beings rely on other human beings to keep ourselves whole and to keep ourselves focused. Social support reduces our stress. We know that, and that's why this isolation is such a big issue for our mental health, but also it predisposes us to a lot of physical health issues, immune system, cardiovascular issues. It's so tensing to the body that it is an issue. So reaching out for support, even on a very basic practical level, like we started by talking about the holidays, who says you have to do it all? Get the kids involved,
Yes.
have a potluck, engage people in moving forward so it's not all on you. And then we started to talk about financial well-being, and many of us feel that we should know more than we actually do, and we don't know where to start, and we don't want to say anything because we should know this, that, and the other. Forget about it. Everybody's in the same boat. And a lot of people don't realize that employee assistance programs actually help with financial consultation. It's not just about counseling. It is actually designed to be that one-stop shop if you're not really sure what's going on. So you could be laser focused and say, I want financial consultation, legal consultation, assistance in finding childcare, elder care information. All of these things are within the EAP, or you can just start a conversation, and then the other person is there to help guide you, most often with more than one type of support, because we're complex beings and have complex lives. So just want to remind our listeners, our viewers, just to realize that they can reach out even if they're not 100% sure on why.
Well, it's fascinating because like we don't have a health plan anymore because my husband and I, we both work for ourselves and you really miss it. But when we did have benefits, like, I mean, how many people actually go through the benefit package? And aside from massage or, dental, and physio, like, and prescriptions, how much further do you dive into your plan? I never did. I never knew until like maybe I left a company. Oh, I could have had that. I mean, I didn't read my plan. I just looked for the things I really thought I would need. But, knowing that maybe I could have had some financial assistance, maybe there was another way to help me with, even physical wellness.
Mhm.
Like, that's a
Mhm.
really good idea. Read your plan, talk to HR, if
Yeah.
you're employed. But yeah, no, that's a really good point. So, I just want to know, like you've been talking about this for months. I wonder how hard it was to get people to participate in your studies and feel, they could be completely honest because it is a stigmatic topic. It still is.
Exceptionally so, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's there. I think we when we do these studies, we give people a very safe outlet to be honest, because it is anonymous. I'm not saying Bob or John or anybody said anything, but we're giving them a safe place to tell us what's going on. So the contribution is not difficult to get, and we find that sometimes there's assumption about different cultures and things of that sort, preventing people from coming forward. It's the context that makes it safe. And we do the mental health index, for example, all over the world. And many people thought before we launched in Asia that we would have people quite guarded in terms of what they were telling us, and they were not at all.
Good.
So I really think that we are at a point where it is important for people to speak about their experiences. It validates those experiences. It helps others as well. And when it feels safe, it happens.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Um,
And
Go ahead.
And I'd agree, Jackie, with Paula that, when we did our study in 2024 in January across Yorkville, we're talking to frontline workers, and frontline workers have that heart where they want to share their own experiences because they want to help others too. So they're looking at, who's coming into their office and they're reflecting on that, but they're also reflecting on their own personal experiences. So we always have a really strong uptake of our people who are investing in that survey. And it has been a very open and transparent process. So we were really excited in January. I mean, well, excited, right? For the data, not necessarily to hear of that level of distress in Canadians, but just to have these conversations, to be transparent and open, and to be sharing that, this isn't all a woman's issue. It shouldn't be all on women. And I do think that we need to speak to that too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like to Paula's point, like delegate, right? I would love to see a survey done on women in menopause in different ethnicities and cultures because, for like, let's go back to say the holiday season. We know that Black women are more experience some symptoms more intensely because of systemic racism being dismissed by healthcare. So, other cultures sort of celebrate it. So their mindset's different. And I would love to sort of understand that because when we talk about how to help women through perimenopause and menopause, we're really talking about helping women in a corporate environment. We're not talking about helping women who work in mining or are truck drivers or work in hospitals or teachers who cannot just leave the room or get off the road and have that time, to recuperate or get that help. Or even have the finances. But then even, different ethnicities going through issues. One thing I learned, which I love, is that we have some menopause doulas in Toronto here that help women who are new immigrants to Canada get the care that they need and navigate the healthcare system. So I think we need to see more of that, but I think that will really come from the understanding of how we all are impacted by this, transition in life. So I'll put that on your plate for the next study.
Well, let me give some good news. Let me give some good
Yes,
news.
please.
Well, some good news is increasingly we are finding organizations want to help and are taking action to help. When you talk about how difficult this transition is, particularly and intensely when there isn't awareness around it, when you become more isolated as a
Yeah.
result of going through this life transition, when you feel stigmatized, when you feel physical, this is a loss in productivity risk. Like this,
Yes.
this is very important for organizations because when you're going through perimenopause and menopause, typically women are at their peak in their careers and they're most
Yes.
productive. And this is the last thing that you would want to do is to alienate or isolate individuals who are so important to the success of your business. So with all of that said, we are seeing engage organizations such as ourselves and others in developing women's health programs. And
Yes.
it focuses on menopause and it focuses on perimenopause, but it also focuses on the full life cycle in terms of women's health. Pregnancy, postpartum, a huge
Yes.
one is endometriosis and the impact on people, the impact on fertility, the delayed diagnosis, the lack of awareness. So it really is making sure that we look at health and we look at it in a genderized way because it is genderized,
It
right?
is
Like
genderized.
yeah.
Yes.
And so we
Yeah.
just essentially it's just playing the ball where it lay, but it's protecting people's mental health and productivity in doing so.
Exactly. You're at the peak of your career. This is where we see like a lack of presenteeism because here we are with brain fog and it's the unspoken thing we go through. We don't want to tell anyone on our team that we are forgetting things or that, we're having a hot flash and we need to go to the bathroom and just like, whoo, or urinal incontinence, like all the things, right? And it impacts your relationship at home, which you can't help but bring back into like your day-to-day life. So there's so many reasons that we need to support women. And like you said, I think it's like all of our reproductive and physical and mental health that we have to do a lot more work for women because we are a huge part and a critical part of the workforce. So yeah, we'll touch that one later. But so how about some more good news? How about some thoughts on how, we've talked about how we're all impacted by the stress and anxiety and the upcoming chaos. Any tips on helping women through this period?
Of course, we have tips, Jackie. So there are things we can do, and like Paula said, there is good news. First of all, in that broad, overarching way we look at mental health and accessing, our own therapy and going in and having someone to talk to who is highly skilled and trained in these areas, we're seeing more accessibility. We're seeing better ways to access our therapists. We have virtual opportunities now. We've got more in the market so that we have more ability to choose who definitely resonates with us. Another one of my favorite statements is psychologists need psychologists, therapists needs therapists.
Yeah.
We need someone to talk to, right? And it doesn't matter if we are in the field or not, having that unbiased look and presence and just that back and forth is so powerful. Now, when Paul and I started working together on this, one of the things that, we got together and we didn't want to create well, just go have an Epsom salt bath. It'll all be fine. We realize that is not it. So there are things that we can do to take control of our mental well-being, and that includes delegating. It includes rethinking those perfectionist traditions, and that is really hard in some family systems to push up against tradition and say this doesn't resonate with me or my family anymore, and that's okay. And to not harbor the guilt for feeling that way. So again, we look to social media and the garlands are on the, staircase and the big fancy tree. Honestly, Jackie, I have a Christmas tree from Canadian Tire and it fits in a box and it collapses with one rod and I can put it together in about 32 and a half seconds. And it is pre-decorated and I plug it in because one of the things I realized was hauling that Christmas tree up in its 3 massive parts. There's sparkles all over. I'm mad by the time I get up the stairs with the first one, let alone the other 2 that still have to come. And then come January, guess who's taking it all down again? And I am dealing with the glitter that lasts for 4 weeks. So this tree, every time I plug it in, it's honestly not the most beautiful tree, but it makes me wildly happy to think I took some control over what made me unhappy and I fixed it. So that's another piece of this, right? Is releasing that perfection. I am present, but I am not perfect. And that is what we can achieve during this holiday season. We need to embrace self-compassion, and we can do that by really thinking about what self-compassion means to us. And then we need to take the time, eat well, breathe, rest. Go talk to someone if you need to. Say no if you feel like you have to. And remember that whatever is said around your, Christmas table or holiday table or whatever you decide to do with your family, it is not your responsibility to monitor other people's mouths. What is coming out of them and their feedback, you don't have to carry that. And I think as women, we want everybody to be happy. We want everybody to be comfortable. We want everybody to have such a wonderful time. But it is out of our control if people engage in conflict, if they talk about politics, that it is not necessarily the best subject to have at the table. Someone says something inappropriate, we can release that emotional labor. Like I said before, we can be present, but we don't have to be perfect.
I really like that because we have a rule in my house. It changed during COVID. Um, because we spend Christmas Eve with my mom and dad and my brother and his wife and the kiddos, and it's very casual. No one gets dressed up. It's my favorite part about Christmas now because we have a simple meal, chicken stew. My dad makes it. Um, my mom and dad and all the adults, we don't give each other gifts. We give each other experiences. So it's like a gift certificate for mom and dad to take the girls to a show, or, we're going to go on a hike, or we're going to do a picnic. It's experiences. The kids still get gifts because they're young, but they don't get 1,000 gifts like that. That A, breaks the bank. B, it's like pure consumerism, but also they don't need this stuff. And we're teaching them, or trying to teach them, you don't, the Christmas is not about, being overwhelmed with all these physical presents. It's about, so what if my house isn't perfect? When we have friends over during the holidays, I always write an email saying, I love you, but I am not cleaning my house for you. And people expect that.
I mean, it's beautiful what you said, because essentially you're making decisions to invest in the things that make you happy and not invest in the things that do not. And it sounds simple when it's words, but we very often get caught in a trough of expectation that we don't really need. The only thing I would sort of add to this conversation is that mental well-being and resilience, it doesn't just happen. Like you're not, it requires investment, just like your physical health. So, one thing, and Chris mentioned it as well, is we are not intended as human beings to be alone. When you think about it, anthropologically, if you were alone, you would die, right? Like, you need other people around you to take on some of the responsibilities, to be there to provide support when things are difficult. And we know that actually contributes to resilience and reduces stress. There was also the point around nutrition. Nutrition, physical activity, your brain is a part of your body. Like, I know myself, if I'm hungry or I'm tired, anything's disrupted physically, emotionally, I'm a lot more labile. It's, you're kind of on Tinder. So it's not that type of Tinder, by the way. The one where things
Tinder
things
hooks,
things
not
catch
Tinder
on
swipe.
fire.
Right.
Right. So that's the other thing. You were talking about, the choices that you make. There's a balance of experience. Like, even variety is important. If you're going down a path and you work and you shop and you work and you clean and you work and you take a break, do something different, not necessarily just nothing, but just something that gives you pleasure. And the last thing that I would add is, do pay attention to your thinking styles as well. We all have our own way of interacting with the world and thinking about things. And some of that we develop ourselves, some of it we learn.
Mhm.
But is it helping you? If you're frustrated, what do you do? Do you lash out at others? Do you dwell? Do you make your world a little bit smaller and more difficult? Or do you reach out, get support, try to problem solve, think of things in a balanced way and sort of other than black and white? So you can do that, but it's very helpful to get support, to think things through, if your way of interpreting things is always making you feel weaker, as opposed to, something has happened, it's not great, let me understand it, but let me take steps to gain control. That's ultimately what we want.
I 100% agree. I tend to go the passive aggressive insidious route where, I'm like, I'm okay. And then everyone pays slowly, like death by a thousand cuts. But I have learned the past year, I'm really investing in learning more about neuroplasticity and just how that, can really change the way that we approach things, because everything we approach, it usually comes from a lens from the past. So, and when you put yourself into a chaotic situation, if you've had some sort of trauma in the past, that is just such a big trigger. I just like one quick question. These are really great strategies for us as women dealing with family and holidays and even just on a, any sort of cultural event, Easter, whatever else we have going on. What about the workforce though? Like, on top of all of this, we're balancing work, and work can be really busy before the holidays because that's when clients go, oh yeah, you're closed next week, so here's 1,000 deadlines for you. Like, is there any sort of strategy for keeping your cool during those last couple of weeks leading up to the holidays?
Number one, remember, it's not just you.
Mm.
Everybody's sort of in that same boat. How many times has somebody come to you in the workplace and said, we're getting close to the holidays right now. Let's push off that deadline, or let's push off that meeting until a little bit later, or let's do just part now and we can do part later, because it's possible. It's not something that's necessarily urgent. And that other person, when they say that to you, feel great. You can be the initiator of those things as well. I think we give ourselves not enough credit understanding what is truly a priority and what isn't. The other thing is that when we are talking about social support, whether it's delegating, collaborating, or just commiserating, it's about doing that in our lives. It's not just our personal lives, but relationships that we have at work are pretty important as well. And when you have trusted relationships in the workplace, your work stress, regardless of the objective measure of it, is going to be less. And I'll just stress the word trusted. because it's not just about being in the office, it's not just about connecting with people. It's about, you actually sometimes being the one who shows that you trust somebody else, who shows gratitude, who shows some vulnerability, who shows some compassion, and then a trust relationship builds. So we tend to be pretty guarded, again, more so recently than others, and that's not helping us either. So prioritizing, pushing off, delegating, and getting the advantage of social support even at work.
That's an excellent point, because I know that feeling of relief when you have something big coming up and you're like, oh, I can breathe on this till January. And then approach it with, a little bit of a fresher approach, because you've taken a break. Hopefully you've taken a break, right? And I
Yes.
think that's another thing. Like, the holidays are crazy, but we need to plan some downtime for ourselves. So,
And that's really important. And just to build on what Paula had said too, is I think that when we look at our colleagues, we also have to remember all those different ages and stages with whom we work, right?
mhm.
And be curious about where they are, how they're coping through the holidays. I know that, our colleagues, we've got colleagues who are, probably in their late 20s, their 30s, their 40s, some of the ages that I am and that we are. But we're all in different places, yet we do still experience a lot of those same levels of stressors, right? The financial stressors, the where are they going for the holidays, and we don't get along with that particular person and they're going to be there. And so we're building that up in our own minds. And oftentimes our intrinsic narrative is way worse than than the actual activity. One of the things I always said to my daughter as she was growing up was, something that you dread typically is something that you enjoy the most. It's just that we have created this in our head, and then we get there and reality hits, and it really isn't that bad.
Yeah, you're so right.
Yes, yes. So I think just being curious about how we're feeling and why we're feeling that way. Why do we feel like we have to hit that deadline before, Christmas Eve day? Why do we have to get our teams together? Is it really going to result in productivity and beneficial discussions and that empowerment that we want from our team? Or is it best to just let us rest, rejuvenate, reconnect, and come back in January fresh and strong? And I would rather come to the table fresh and strong.
Yeah, we need to recharge. I love everything you've said. I've even picked up some tips for myself. I'm gonna have to create some boundaries this holiday season, which is hard for women, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's hard to say no, but like you said, no is a complete sentence. And just what you said there reminds me of that quote. Fear is worse than the event itself. It's true. We get worked up thinking the worst is going to happen, and then nothing happens, right? We're allowed to push things off. We're allowed to put self-care in front of, soft deadlines. So, you guys have given me so much great advice here, and you've given everyone listening great advice. And I hope everyone listening is going to take note of some of these things. And I really am a firm believer in therapy, because if we work our bodies out, we do all these things to look after ourselves, we put good food into our bodies, we have to work our brains too and our minds, and it's too hard to do that in isolation. So I think, if anyone was going to do, a self-care treat for themselves in the new year, it's get yourself a good therapist.
Yes, absolutely. And one that you resonate with. You can try on therapists. The first one is not going to always work for you, and that's okay. You can be curious about why that didn't, but you can find someone who you really click with. And that is empowering in itself.
It's a relationship, right? And it's a connection, like to Paula's point, like, we need connection, and connection is what sort of keeps us going and productive and healthy and happy. So, well, I hope we're all going to take your advice and have a wonderful holiday. I hope you both get some rest during the holidays. And thank you so much for the hard work that you're doing. I'm going to share these studies if I can, because I think it's like, just even as someone, just like a general consumer like me, reading through it was really illuminating. Really made me take a step back in some areas and think, this is an area I might have to prioritize, or this is an area I might have to just delegate. So thank you so much for everything today. Like, there's been a lot of really good insights, really good statistics that really show us where we're at and where we need to go and how we need to survive the holidays.